Hello, and welcome back to Let's Get Lit. In today's episode, we're going to be going over the book review and the why for the Canterbury Tales. Now, again, I am not a scholar, I have not studied this, but these are just kind of some hot takes that I have based on what we've read and going through this whole series. So, join me as we kind of talk about some of the finer points. Let's start off with the why. Why is this book so influential? And why are some stories taught in school whereas they omit others? Let's address that in two separate sections. And let's start off with why I think this book is so influential. I believe one of the reasons that the Canterbury Tales is such an influential book is because of the time period in which it was written. It offers a glimpse into everyday lives, stories that are about everyday people in that time period. Throughout the Canterbury Tales, we see a multitude of different stories from different backgrounds, etc., etc. And I think we get a really good view of society in that time. From the high and lofty of the knight and the lawyer's tale, to the down and dirty miller's tale and seaman's tale and everything else. This book really kind of has a little bit of all different walks of life, but you can see that kind of connecting theme with all of them referencing either the Bible or philosophers or things of that nature. So though they're dirty and very raunchy at some points, they all kind of tend to lean towards those classic or religious elements. I think another reason this book is taught primarily as well, or at least some of the stories, the fact that the way the book is written, or some of the stories are written. So some of them are written in verse, which when reading back were kind of fun because the ones that were in verse, it kind of made it a little easier to read. And once your mind got into the process of this word's gonna rhyme, it's almost like, and this is very far stretch, but like Dr. Seuss, where it just kind of flows, which is really fun. And I think once you get into that, it's really kind of easier to understand and read because though some of the words you may not know, it kind of fills in the rest of the gap as you're reading the story. You're using context clues. I also think that one of the reasons this book is taught because there are many references to other classic literature. We get the reference with the monk when he talks about Ugliano. Reading Dante's Inferno, we see Ugliano in the 9th level of hell. It's in the very deepest one, when he's in the ice. Well, it's fun because you're seeing that reference, and so it's cross-referencing Dante, who wrote his book not too terribly long before this. So that's really fun. Also, I think what's really interesting is even in the dirty, raunchy comedies, they're still referencing Samson or Adam or Noah or all these other famous characters from the Bible that they would have really known at that time frame. I'm also really surprised to see a lot of like Aristotle references, Plato references, things that I actually didn't think they would know or was that heavy in the time frame, but they do reference that as well. So I think that's really fun that they're incorporating those classic references in this story. The third point I want to make and why I think it's taught in schools is because a lot of times when people read classic literature, they're going to think, oh, this is going to be boring. Oh, this is going to be really silly. It's not going to be my cup of tea. But when you break that wall down, which I think Chaucer does by using his rhyme scheme, you get to see that they're really actually quite fun. The Miller's Tale is a perfect example. It is raunchy and dirty, but something I could actually see in today's media. Like you kind of hear those stories or you know something similar. Top of that, you do have The Knight's Tale, which is really great, but also it's classic, but it's not overly boring. When reading this one, I was kind of worried for some of the longer stories. Constance is one with the lawyer, The Knight's Tale, The Student's Tale, all of them have multiple parts, but when getting into it, you just realize they're referencing a lot of details to try to clear the scene. They're trying to make it feel epic, when in reality, their whole story is very simple. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're taught, because you have the loftiness and that classical element, but that low, dirty, disgusting humor is also in there too. I just think it's kind of fun, and it's one thing you can kind of say, yeah, I've read that, or I've read a few stories from that. All that's out of the way, let's get into the review of this. All in all, did I enjoy the Canterbury Tales? I will say for the most part, I did enjoy this. I would say I'm 75% positive of this book, maybe 80%, and the reason for that being is because for the most part, a lot of the stories are really fun. The Knight's Tale is fun, Miller's Tale is fun, Wife of Bath's Tale, that's really kind of cool to see. The Student's Tale I think is great. So you have quite a few that are really fun. Now, just like in history, not everything is positive. Of course, you got to take the good with the bad. I do think that for me, what kind of lets this book down, or I think especially my negatives for this book, some of the viewpoints, some of the language that is used, and some of the situations obviously don't fly today. Now again, we're going to talk about this book as adult. That is how we're going to approach this. So know that what I'm saying, I obviously don't condone, but I want to kind of make things clear. I think Of course, Semitism, that is not okay, and her using the Jews as a scapegoat or as villains obviously is not okay today, and I think to vilify that, especially in today's climate, not so good. I think also with the story about the Miller, not the Miller story, but the story about the Miller, those two Oxford students, they take full advantage of them, knowingly and actively tricking them. It comes across as fun in the book. Some of the things that try to make light of in today's society and views, they're not okay. You just can't look past. But you have to take that and go, okay, that was obviously then, that is not okay. And even in the stories, they're not saying it's okay. It's just an action that happens. The other one, for example, the one about the knight, and he takes the maidenhood of the maiden, of the virgin, and has to go and find the answer. That essentially means and took her virginity without consent. They try to word things to make them sound less worse, but in reality, these are very serious crimes. These are very, very serious things these characters do. I see why some are not taught. The Cook's Tale is like a page long, if that much. I think Chaucer was trying to be funny, but it just doesn't come across. Now again, that humor hasn't aged well, so that's that. I think the other thing, good or bad, whether you're religious or not, the Parson's Tale, I don't know if Chaucer meant to be this dry with it, but it does read like a sermon. Obviously, because it's from the parson. I don't think even in that time period, many people would have finished that story. I think they would have skipped over it or tried to just kind of shorten it because it's not really that fun to read through. The video that I did about the Parson's Tale, that was a very condensed version. Going back through all of these, but also teach moral lessons that are very fun. Almost in the way of Grimm's fairy tales, where it's kind of a moral wrapped in a comedic or interesting take. The Wife of Baths is more about equality for women and men and how they should be equal in marriage. The Nun's Priest Tale about Chanticleer is a kind of parody on the knights and all of those tales. The Pardoner's Tale is about death and greed. They get their just desserts in the end. Again, they're kind of like sometimes like fairy tales. I'm going to keep this short and let you know, do I think you should read the Canterbury Tales? And I think this is a perfect example of times when this one you can truly pick and choose. I don't necessarily think you have to read them all, but I would say if you are interested in the Canterbury Tales, there are definitely more than a few that you should check out and you should read. And if you want, I will list those down in the comments below, so that way you guys kind of know which ones are worth your time. If you want to read them all, I feel like you'll enjoy the story overall. And I'll definitely tell you that I believe most people will skip The Parson's Tale again for good reason. I definitely think this book has its highs and lows, and it's definitely not for everyone. But I do feel like if you want a glimpse into the past and the Middle Ages, if you read the whole book, you do get those prologues and epilogues in some portions, so that's fun. I actually enjoyed this. Again, 80-20, 80% enjoyed it, 20% did not. I do think it's worth your time to read some of them just for fun if you have some extra time. Join me in the next video as I try to find some different adaptations of this and see if those are worth your time. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Please enjoy. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, stay lit.